Welcome to Rowling Studies, the podcast of the Hogwarts Professor. And we are joined with the Hogwarts Professor, Dr. John Granger. Hello, John. Merry Christmas.
Hello, Nick.
So this should be released somewhere between the Eastern and Western Christmases. Do you want to tell us what you've been looking at?
Yeah, just some context about what a golden thread is, and why we're pursuing this rather than speculating wildly about the publication date and the number of pages and Hallmark Man. It's a hallmark, if you will, of our fourth generation thesis that it's time to read Rowling's work as a whole now. Cut out the focus on just the latest book or the book that's coming up in queue, and to focus on the biography and bibliography lens of the Lake and Shed. And because here at Hogwarts Professor, we've been talking so much about Shed artistry for so long, the literary alchemy, the ring composition, the psychomagia, all that stuff. We're more interested in the Lake side of things. The biography elements that are Rowling's inspiration, according to her 2019 interview and her 2023 bits on writing. This causes, what's the step if we're going to start working on what might be called the critical biography stage of Rowling's study of Rowling's work? Well, you need to look at plot points, and that's been done a little bit in Rowling studies. We've talked about the bad dads. We've talked about the divine mothers, how she uses a mother's sacrificial love, selfless and sacrificial love as a trope for the love of Christ. But we really haven't talked that much about plot points as golden threads, things like alchemy that are evident in everything she writes, or the ring writing, or the soul metaphors that she uses. These things we've detailed how they go through everything that Rowling writes. But we haven't talked about plot points that are just mysterious. They're not really artistry. They're simply signature elements of story that Rowling uses again and again and again, almost in everything she writes. And the first one that I want to talk about, and that I've spent the last 3 months detailing, is the coercive love in general and pregnancy traps specifically. And the reason that I chose that one rather than, say, suicide, sacrificial love, sacrificial death, or incest, or the dead child and the grieving mother. There's a lot of things that run through everything that Rowling writes. But the pregnancy trap one, I've started with that one because of its pervasiveness. It's, again, especially after I wrote these 7 posts, I surprised even myself going back and looking at Rowling's work, how much coercive love and pregnancy traps just pervade everything that she writes. And they're not only are they there in number, but they're there in quality. They're essential to the storyline. The story doesn't even exist without this coercive love element. And besides pervasiveness, there's the hard to unsee quality. But once it's shown up and highlighted, especially if you look across the entire spectrum of her work. We're doing the opera omnia overview here. Once you see it, it's impossible to forget it. It's also tied into the other golden threads. You're going to see the bad dad and the divine mother. You're going to see the incest elements and certainly the violence against women. This is a natural lead into the other golden threads that have been neglected through the years. But and one more thing, I like to be, the first in line. And there's this curious matter of how little this has been discussed among serious strikers and Potter pundits. And I'm going to kick this back to you, Nick. Has Rowling ever been asked about coercive love, pregnancy traps, or made comments about pregnancy traps in her work? Has she given us a clue about what exactly a pregnancy trap is? I'm talking about this like everybody was born knowing what a pregnancy trap is, and whether she thinks it's a good or a bad thing as such.
Well, I think the two are related. Certainly, it is striking how little the strike fandom has been discussing pregnancy traps. And I think that's linked to how little in interviews J.K. Rowling has been asked about this and how little she's offered specifically on pregnancy traps, given how pervasive it is within the Strike series. But if we go way back in history and we look at, I guess, the original pregnancy trap, which is Merope Gaunt, then she has talked about that, and that shows very clearly both elements. So it is clearly coercive love from Merope because she uses amortentia. So amortentia is the system within the wizarding world, the potion that forces someone to feel feelings of at least pseudo love. And using that, she becomes pregnant, and there is your original pregnancy trap.
She's actually married, right? I mean, I'm not sure if amortentia qualifies as a pregnancy trap as such. Anyway, we'll talk more about this in a second. I'm just, the Merope Gaunt thing is so important.
The pregnancy trap is to use within the Strike view, so the non-magical writing of Rowling. The pregnancy trap is the means by which you secure a relationship. And you could take amortentia to the wizarding world way of securing that relationship. But that pregnancy, so Merope's pregnancy, absent amortentia, is certainly would have been unwanted by Tom Riddle Sr.
Yes.
On the Bloomsbury live chat that Rowling had after the publication of Deathly Hallows, she was asked, how much does the fact that Voldemort was conceived under a love potion have to do with his non-ability to understand love? Is it more symbolic? And Rowling answered, it was a symbolic way of showing that he came from a loveless union. But of course, everything would have changed if Merope had survived and raised him herself and loved him. The enchantment under which Tom Riddle fathered Voldemort is important because it shows coercion. And there can't be many more prejudicial ways to enter the world than as a result of such a union. So that shows very clearly Rowling's attitude to the use of coercion.
That's really a remarkable statement. I mean,
I found it, when I first heard it, I found it really very uncomfortable.
Off-putting, maybe?
Which is rare for me because I am the archetypal sympathetic listener when I listen to what Rowling says. Where comes my lack of comfort? So this is saying that essentially the children of rape have an inability to understand love.
Wow.
Of course, if that's my takeaway, I'm going to feel really, really uncomfortable. There's a sentence in there that was sort of lost in that shock sort of last statement. So what was in there that I lost was, but of course, everything would have changed if Merope had survived and raised him herself and loved him. But okay, even without that, those last two statements actually are still really quite disturbing. You know, this is sort of an addition to the doctrine of original sin. If you are born in a loveless union, you know, you're already starting off as a disadvantage. And in some ways, I guess that is true. People who are born in a loving union have a natural advantage. People who are born outside of a loving union have a natural disadvantage. I would like to think that Rowling is just understanding that natural advantage and disadvantage that people have entering into this world. It's not to say that that is a moral consequence. So you are necessarily evil or necessarily good, depending upon how you were conceived.
Yeah, well, you bring up the rape thing. My thought was of orphans and orphanages and how hard she's labored through Lumos to bring those children into families. The suggestion in what she's saying is that if you don't grow up in a loving environment, because of the link to Voldemort, that you're somehow predisposed to some sort of sociopathology or psychopathology.
And she's expanded on this in her work, of course, with Lumos, where she's demonstrated actually that the people that are brought up within an institution have these massive disadvantages not through any fault of
Right.
their own,
Yeah.
but they are more disposed to end up within the criminal justice system. They're more disposed to be victims of substance abuse and all kinds of other horrors.
And I'm not arguing with those facts. I think those are those are not only logical, but I'm sure they're demonstrated by the sociology involved with it. My problem, of course, is that it means that people that grew up in those institutions that have struggled to come to terms with this successfully, when they're met and someone finds out they grew up in an orphanage, they're like, oh, well, it becomes a strike against them rather than a credit to them for having struggled with those issues and against the tide of that influence. Anyway, it's a very odd comment for her to make in a bold way, as it puts disadvantaged people, to use your term, at a further disadvantage in being linked with that problem. Anyway, your definition of a pregnancy trap is basically it's weaponized intimacy to secure a relationship, either a marriage or a financial thing or a social status. Is that right?
Yes, and to be a pregnancy trap, it has to be conscious. So it has to be a deliberate decision by one party, obviously, usually the female of the partnership, a conscious decision to get pregnant. Not an accident, but a deliberate, conscious decision with the purpose of entrapping their partner into a
You've been very
relationship.
careful there. You haven't said a woman trapping a man, and that's prudent, because clearly in Rowling's work there's characters that are men that trap women via pregnancy.
Yes, yeah,
So it can be deliberate on the man's part as well as deliberate on the woman's part.
yes. Obviously, for a man to create a pregnancy trap holds a few more challenges. So it's very difficult to do as a subterfuge. So it's more usually a power play. It's done with some either implied or direct
I get
force.
it. I just want to just put a little asterisk on that, to note that Canadians have an expression for pregnancy trap. They call it pulling the goalie, meaning that you don't use prophylactics properly. You leave an open
Yeah,
goal there, and that either the man or the woman can pull the goalie.
yeah. So I think we see Bijou attempting that at one point, don't we?
Well, yeah, Bijou, but I'm thinking more of Jeff Whitaker. That
Right.
Bijou is, as I confess, I'm delighted by the possibility that Strike is actually the father of Bijou's child. Um, just because it puts him in the exact position that Rokeby is in. I mean, the man that he hates, because obviously he wants nothing to do with the mother, and he resents the child and what it means to his life. It'd just be such a wonderful comeuppance to Strike because of how he treats women throughout the series. If he's unhappy, he's happy to go off and have sex with somebody that he in this case, someone that he actually hates. The first time he notes that he hates Bijou Watkins. Getting way ahead of ourselves here.
To go back to the origin, then, so the first pregnancy trap that you wrote about was Merope
Yeah,
Gaunt
she's
in your
she's the beginning.
first post. Yeah, and you call that the foundation crime of the whole series, even though we only really find out about that almost at the end. So I guess my question is, really?
Well, okay, now I think I wrote in that first post, and really this podcast is to encourage people to go back and read all these posts, because each one of these posts is relatively long, and I still left things out of them. There's a lot of pregnancy traps going on, but number one in the series is Merope Gaunt, because it's the pregnancy trap that really is at the beginning of the series. But the foundation crime of the entire Hogwarts saga is the abuse of Merope Gaunt inside her home as a child, as a young woman. She's clearly abused physically and verbally by her father and her brother. And there's even, I mean, forgive me, I think after Patrick Macaulay's discussion of the crimes against Ariana Dumbledore, that I think we can assume that there was sexual violence against her as well, that there's some sort of incest here. That's the foundation crime of the entire Hogwarts saga, because it leads to Merope Gaunt wanting to escape that. When her brother and father are taken away from their home and imprisoned in Azkaban, her magic, reappears, and then she launches a deliberate pregnancy trap against Tom Riddle Sr. It can be argued, because it's obviously true, the cause of that event were the psychological and physical abuse of Merope by her father Mervolo and her brother Morphin, which makes that the foundation crime of the series. The trap, however, is what conceives the Dark Lord coercively and its failing to work creates the psychopathic child and wizard and the death of the mother, Merope. We get, but as you point out, we only get the evidence of that in Half-Blood Prince. We're 85% into the books at that point, and we finally learn about why this evil person, Voldemort, is who he is. And the interview you quoted about the coercive love and how that's a horrible way to enter the world, even though it's that far into the series, we know Rowling had that in mind at the very beginning of the books when McGonagall was talking to Dumbledore on the wall at Privet Drive and about the horrors of He Who Shall Not Be Named, is that Rowling already knows that. She said in 1998 that she had the books already plotted all the way through and that she had them almost from the start, really almost on the train. She understood the Dark Lords, that story that is the real story that runs through all of the books. She understood its point of origin was in that pregnancy trap. So even though it doesn't occur itself inside the books as such, it is what makes that conflict make sense, especially with all the bad dads and sacrificial love mothers that are in the books.
Do you think there's broad agreement on that? Because honestly, I think before we started studying the Strike pregnancy traps, and you'd done the work on those posts over on the Hogwarts Professor website, if somebody had asked me, what is the foundation crime of the Hogwarts saga, I would have said, well, the murder
of James and Lily Potter. Yeah, okay, the Halloween murders. That's what's presented, but not only in terms of sequence, but in terms of, cause. The Dark Lord is the person who's murdering people. Why does he do that? Why is he who he is? Why does he hate Harry Potter, who's in a loving relation as a child is if nothing else, he's probably spoiled by his parents, right? He's the only child. He's everything the Dark Lord hates beyond the prophecy because of just who he is. And the fact that he kills Harry Potter's mother. Well, he's killed his own mother in a way. His mother took her own life because of the failed pregnancy trap. So to answer your question, no, I think that it hasn't been recognized. But now that we're taking this fourth generation view and saying, let's look at everything she writes and see how this works. Yes, the Halloween murders of the Potters in Godric's Hollow is seen as the foundation, is the inciting incident of the series in a way. But the inciting incident that leads to that inciting incident is the pregnancy trap of Merope Gaunt. I mean, that's the baseline thing. If you could go back in time and you want to fix the entire Harry Potter series, you don't prevent the Dark Lord from killing James and Lily Potter. You save Merope Gaunt and have her raise the Dark Lord as a beloved child. That's a much simpler solution. or you imprison, Morphin and Marvolo from the get-go for child abuse, and that's to get to it faster. Anyway,
I really like that analysis, John. I'm reminded of when Rowling said that basically casual vacancy is one big question. What do we do about Crystal Whedon? And I love looking at the Hogwarts saga as being one big question. What should we have done about Merope?
And you bring up Crystal Whedon. That's to move on to the second post in the series, which is casual vacancy. I mean, you've convinced me in our public and private conversations that casual vacancy is a key, perhaps the key to grasping Rowling's understanding of her childhood and adolescence in West England. The pregnancy trap in that book, though, doesn't come off, does it? I mean, the pregnancy trap in that book comes at the very end, the way it does in the Harry Potter series, but it's a different kind of failure, isn't it?
Yeah, as you say, I think you'd struggle to find a successful pregnancy trap within any of Rowling's works. But in this one, it was interesting. So we're talking about Crystal Whedon. So Crystal Whedon is, after she's been raped by Obbo, she sets a trap, but not for Fats. So she wants to get impregnated by Fats. But the trap isn't for Fats. Fats basically, at the point that Crystal is with him, is incapable of love. So he's in a state of anime to pinch a future work. He is essentially the Voldemort of the casual vacancy. This trap isn't set for him. It's set for Colin and Tessa Ward, who for all their troubles, are loving people. So Crystal, when she's running through this inner monologue, says the walls would probably give her money. They were like that. She could imagine Tessa's plain, concerned face bending over a cot. Crystal would have their grandchild. She would lose Fats in getting pregnant. They always went once you were expecting. She had watched it happen nearly every time in the fields, but perhaps he would be interested. Oh, he's so strange. It did not much matter to her either way. Her interest in him, except as the essential component in her plan, had dwindled to almost nothing. So it's a trap, but
She
it's
wants
a
that
trap
clean
for a
house. She
family.
wants that clean house.
It's an escape plan. It's an escape hatch for her and Robbie after she's raped by Obbo, a horrible character, her mother's dealer and lover. So that gives the nightmare scene more than a hint of incest. Interestingly, as well, as she's running through the town and running through this inner monologue, she's constantly thinking
That's right.
of Barry Fairbrother, who is the only real father
She even
figure
suggests that it's his ghost speaking to her, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. She's almost having a conversation with him. We've got Crystal Whedon. She clearly an abused young lady, limited understanding of how things work, and we've got Fats, who in that instance has some qualities of Tom Senior. So he's the potential victim of a pregnancy trap, and as I said earlier, he is within Casual Vacancy, he is the Voldemort. So Fats himself is the product, at the very least,
Yeah.
of statutory rape, very likely incest. He has this awful self-rationalizing lack of empathy and decency, which he cloaks as being authenticity. You know, the most artificial authenticity
This
you
is
could
the
possibly
anti
imagine.
Catcher in the Rye. This is Rowling's response to Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, but it's also her response to Deathly Hallows. So Fats is allows her to play out Voldemort being given an alternate ending to Deathly Hallows. So if you remember at the end of Deathly Hallows in that powerful scene, you've got Harry saying it's your one last chance. And it's all you've got left. I've seen what you'll be otherwise. Be a man. Try for some remorse. And of course, Voldemort is unable to feel remorse. So a little bit earlier, when they're investigating what happens if you try and put your soul back together from the use of Horcruxes, we've got Hermione reading. So Ron says, "Is there any way of putting yourself back together?" "Yes," said Hermione with a hollow smile, "but it would be excruciatingly painful." "Why? How do you do it?" "Remorse," said Hermione. "You've got to really feel what you've done." So that's the answer why Voldemort doesn't do it, because it would be excruciatingly painful, such that it would almost destroy him. Well, at the very end of Casual Vacancy, and I know I'm going off topic a little bit here, but at the end of Casual Vacancy, you have Fats essentially destroying himself with the remorse that he feels. I mean, he repents to such an extent that he even admits to crimes he hasn't committed. So all of the Ghost of Barry Fairbrother, he admits to. You see him a crumpled figure at the end, and if it wasn't for the harsh love of his mother and the soft love of his father at that point, which of course Voldemort didn't have the opportunity of, I think he would have been destroyed as well.
And this is a wonderful point about that he admits the crimes that he hadn't committed. When his mother, Tessa, confronts him in the car about his point of origin and essentially the trap that she sprang on her husband to adopt him. Remember, she's a type 1 diabetic. She's not having children. It's a tremendous risk for type 1 diabetics to have children. And so she traps him into this adoption. And when she confronts Fats about this and what he's done, she says to him, I'm almost crying thinking of it. She says that your father has lived his life confessing to things that he hasn't even done, and would that you had such courage. And Fats becomes that man in his remorse.
Yeah.
He finally has the courage to confess the things that he hasn't done, to take on sins that aren't his own. It's fascinating. And
If there are any listeners out there who haven't braved Casual Vacancy, and I sort of understand because it can be a difficult read, I urge you to pick it up. It has such depth and such richness. I think we're only just now, as commentators, starting to really explore
really,
that work.
the impetus to it is because of the fourth generation thing, that we have to understand her biography as much as her bibliography to really grasp the artistry and meaning of what she writes. And this is, obviously the most autobiographical piece that she's written. I think Ink Black Heart and Christmas Pig are also more autobiographical, or more obviously autobiographical than her other work. But Casual Vacancy stands alone in this respect. And there's, not only do we have the trap that Crystal Whedon sets for, as you say, Colin and Tessa Wall, which is a brilliant point I didn't make in my post, not for Fats. We have, as I just said, we have the trap that Tessa sprang on Colin earlier, which is in a way the foundation crime of the whole, Fats Wall Voldemort inside the books. Once again, we have, Colin, who tries to commit suicide after he's trapped in this thing where his wife has adopted a child he does not want. He doesn't feel he's equal to being this kind of father. There's that. But then there's Kay and Gaia Bowden as well. I don't know. The Bowden family, she suggests quite clearly to, she confesses to the Mullinson daughter-in-law that, in effect, her daughter Gaia was born in a failed pregnancy trap, and we have Gaia trying to, work the same kind of trap almost with her boyfriend before she moves. She tries to, basically she tries to use the coercive sex thing to secure a relationship, if not by pregnancy, then at least by intimacy. And of course, Kay is doing the same thing in Padford with her boyfriend there. She's moved there. She's trying to get Gavin to marry her or do something with her. You assume it's marriage that she's aiming at, and Gavin wants nothing to do with it. That storyline actually works out, probably because there's no pregnancy involved, and that the Bowdens are leaving, this nightmare village at the end of the thing, and leaving pathetic Gavin to to himself. But Casual Vacancy is crowded with pregnancy traps. We've got the original Colin and Tessa Wall trap with, to bring Stewarts into their family. We got the Kay and Gaia Bowden thing, which is past and present, and we have poor Crystal's attempt, seemingly at the prompting of the ghost of Fairbrother, who is both present in the internet figment that he has, or what do you call them, avatar that he is, or as the real behind the scenes agent of the story. Really,
only the Strike series seems to approach the quantity, if not of pregnancy traps, then at the very least coercive love instances compared to the number of relationships within the work.
And again, it's different than Merope Gaunt, who's invisible until you're in chapter 13, as Irvin would point out very, very correctly.
Yeah.
Again, a chapter 13 thing in Half-Blood Prince, we learn about Merope Gaunt, and that's a big deal, but it doesn't seem to pervade the work. It's underneath everything, and it's astonishing when it's revealed. But there it is. Here we're getting the big reveals of all the pregnancy traps come at the very end.
Yes. So in both Potter and Casual Vacancy. In contrast, I guess, to the Strike series.
We'll talk about that. What I'm saying though is that instead of being the foundation crime, which it is in some degree, is taking your insight that Fats is the Voldemort of the series, of the book. I'd note that it's all points in the story lead to her attempt to become pregnant by Fats, and hope that it's not pregnant by Odo, whatever his name is. And that causes the revelation of all these things. I mean, the ghost of Fairbrother wants everything revealed. In the end, he wants all this stuff that's underneath that only he can see from the spirit dimension revealed, and we get that. When were the Walls ever going to tell Fats about who he is and where he is, and what else could have brought Fats to understand his father, and how this is his real father, this man that he despises and ridicules in public. It's all brought about by that pursuit of the Hail Mary pregnancy trap that Whedon throws at the end. So it's at the finish, but it's not a subliminal foundation crime. It's the crime or the trap to which everything in this book has led us to, and which opens up all the mysteries of the book in the end. But again, you can't get more important in terms of a plot point in Casual Vacancy than that climax.
No, it is certainly the crisis. I don't know if everything necessarily leads up to it, although I have to say my experience of reading the Strike novels says that I'm really bad at predicting where things are going to go. I can't say as I was reading, I was predicting that would happen, but it is certainly the crisis. It is the point that lays all the cards on the table.
Yeah, I mean, the importance of pregnancy traps is not only their number, and I think we're about to enter into the catalog of pregnancy traps in the Strike books, but it's their importance. You don't get more important than Merope Gaunt in terms of why the story is what it is. You don't get Lord Voldemort without Merope Gaunt, and without Lord Voldemort, what really is the Harry Potter series? And with Casual Vacancy, without Crystal Whedon's Hail Mary pregnancy trap attempt and her consequent suicide after the death of Robbie, it leads to the death of a child, and the child is lionized, and and everything being revealed. You don't get more important than that inside that book.
And so the key, we've got the key pregnancy trap of the Potter series. We've got the key pregnancy trap, the crisis point of Casual Vacancy. In contrast to those two, Strike Ellicott, where rather than having to get almost to the climax of the book, we've got a pregnancy trap right at the beginning. So we've got Leader Strike's capture of Johnny Rugby via a very dramatic public conception in New York. So, John, the pregnancy traps obviously run all the way through the Cormoran Strike series of books. But the Leader Strike, is that the foundation crime?
Boy, I'm going to give that a strikingly convicted I don't know, Nick. We are certainly led to believe by suggestion and by the overwhelming number of pregnancy traps in the Strike series that Leader Strike was someone akin to Sarah Shadlock or Bijou Watkins in shamelessly trying to trap Johnny Rokeby. Now, there's very big problems with that. One, it's never stated, and yet it's taken as an assumption. And if anyone is a serious reader of J.K. Rowling, when you find yourself in that position where you really don't have firm evidence, but you've been led by suggestion to accept something as absolutely true, the red flag should go up that you're being misled. So the evidence that Leader Strike deliberately tried to trap Johnny Rokeby is actually pretty thin. We get Strike's memories. The only person who flat out says that happened are the children on playgrounds where in Strike's school as a child. No one else says that Leader Strike deliberately tried to trap Johnny Rokeby. And then there's just the circumstances of his conception. He's conceived in a New York City bar. How does a groupie with no visible means of support, we don't know any idea of how she's supporting herself, how does she get to New York City? We know that she's, a big fan of a rock band that's based in Long Island or New York, the Blue Oyster Cult. But how does she get from the UK to the US when that was, especially in that time in the early 70s, that wasn't, the easy trip that it was today. That was for people that had real money.
Yeah, so we were just about starting package holidays back in the early 70s. But when we're talking about foreign travel, we're talking about going to Spain for summer.
Transatlantic trips were things that people could afford a ticket on a Cunard liner would do, or the Concorde. This was not something that Leader Strike, hanger-on groupie, would be able to afford unless she had a sponsor. And I'm suspicious that again, we're going to learn the real facts of this so-called pregnancy trap at the finish. We get it about 85% through both books, both the Harry Potter series and Casual Vacancy. I think at the end of 8, 9, or 10, we're going to find out about this. There's Rowling hinted that there's going to be a confrontation that she's been leading up to for the entire series in chapter 119 of Hallmark Man. I think, like most other series strikers, I'm leaning into a Strike Rokeby meeting in an epilogue. He'll finally learn then about his mother's relationship with her. Now Lita seems to know a lot about Johnny Rokeby, about how he is on speed. She's more than familiar with, just instead of a woman that just pulled this guy into a loving embrace on a beanbag chair in front of 50 people. The picture of her that is on a wall in one of the Strike novels shows them as her as being related somehow. That she has some kind of relationship with Johnny Rokeby. That he's not doesn't look at her as just some over-enthusiastic fan, but as someone whose company he enjoys. I suspect that Lita Strike was very much in love with Johnny Rokeby, and that he paid for her ticket to New York, and that they were a thing, and that if she pulled the goalie, as the expression is, and she deliberately chose to do a trap, she wasn't proud of it. Her inability to accept the money gracefully, it's like she wanted to pretend that she and Rokeby still had some kind of relationship. It wasn't a coercive thing that he was forced into, which is how he certainly feels that he was trapped. When that paternity test comes through, he's unwillingly writing checks to support her and her child. She doesn't seem to have that relationship with the money. She seems to really resist that. And her meeting with him outside the recording studio. I mean, how did you experience that meeting?
So it was, I mean, obviously we're seeing it from Strike's point of view. So we're seeing it from a very emotionally overcharged little boy. It was clear that Lita wanted something from Rokeby, and it wasn't the money. She was trying to present the fruit of his loins, again, to try and deepen that trap. This is what you and I created. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, there's always been a buzz that maybe Strike isn't Rokeby's child. He has the curly hair of the lead singer of the Blue Oyster Cult. But everything in the series turns in some way on Lita's relationship with Johnny and the conception of Strike. I mean, because the Strike series isn't really the Strike series, as our podcasting friends say. It's the Strike Ellicott series. So much as it's about Cormoran Strike, it's about his transformation via his relationship with Robin, who in many respects is the anti-Lita Strike. She's the Yorkshire sober woman. She has her vocation, and her vocation is what's important to her even more than her great love for her partner, her business partner. And this is turning Strike inside out. He retains the strongest evidence that he is what he imagines Johnny Rokeby to be, because he doesn't really know Johnny Rokeby, is his sexual congress with Belinda Watkins, a woman that he hates. He just uses her, for I don't know, what do you call it? Just vicarious pleasure. And
I think he's inherited from his mother a certain kind of blindness. So Lita never saw what she didn't want to see. And I think Strike uses that to ignore things he doesn't want to think about. In contrast to Robin. Robin is always eyes wide open. She struggles sometimes to ignore the things she really should be ignoring.
And she hates herself for the times that she wasn't that person, specifically with Matt Cunliffe.
Yeah, that's right. But I think even then, the reason why she was so unhappy is because she had her eyes open the whole time. The only time I can really think of her being blinded is in the opening pages of Cuckoo's Calling, where she's floating around on cloud nine, just being proposed to. Almost every time since that, when Cunliffe is being an arse, she can see him being an arse. She doesn't want him to be an arse,
Even
but
in
she can see it.
the silkworm bar meeting, does she think she sees her husband as an ass?
Yes, yeah. I think
Okay.
she's cringing all the way through that.
Okay.
She can see exactly what he's doing, and she can also see exactly what Strike's doing.
Yeah, it's a great scene. uh, anyway, we're well off this thing, but I think that Strike's understanding of himself as a child conceived, I think he sees himself as a child that was conceived by accident, not the deliberate machination of his mother. And we're not told that he's wrong in that regard. And again, the only time that the pregnancy trap comes up is the assumption with the children on the playground that that's what Leda Strike was doing.
Leda, certainly through Strike's eyes, it was incapable of machination. And I think, again, when I talk about Strike's blindness, I think with Bijou, he was incapable of seeing her machination.
Yeah, which given, again, that's wonderfully seen, Nick, that Strike, for all of his insights, his remarkable ability to see the logs in other people's eyes, if you will, is unable to see the log in his own eye, of course, like all of us. And his naivete is borderline abusive when it comes to women. As long as they're willing partners, no problem. And now, if indeed Belinda Bijou has laid a trap for him, we're going to see him in the exact position that Rokeby was in.
Oh, I hope you're wrong, John. I really hope you're wrong.
It's too delicious to ignore. Anyway, about Leda Strike and the pregnancy thing. Again, we don't know, and I have my strong suspicions again that she was not clever enough or calculating enough to work this trap, and the fact that she was very much hurt that Rokeby didn't embrace that pregnancy. That she had some thought, she had some reason to think that they were in some kind of relationship. Strike doesn't have that luxury. He has that as his self-understanding that his father hated his mother to him, wanted nothing to do with him, despised him, as it were, certainly neglected him. That self-understanding is what he's fighting in his trying to come to terms with the fact that he loves a woman who is totally unlike any other woman that he's ever met. Every other woman he's met, he's had to take care of somehow, or has been responsible for, or that he simply wanted to use for his own pleasure, mutual pleasuring in sexual intimacy. Now that transformation makes the Strike-Rokeby relationship critical to the series. But I think it differs from Merope Gone and Crystal Whedon in that it wasn't a deliberate, as I think most people in fandom assume that it was. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
We're going to come back to the Strike series because, as I said, there's
a lot. There's
really,
a lot, John.
I think there's one book alone that, of the 7 books we have so far, that doesn't feature a pregnancy trap up front in the center. A coercive love relationship. Anyway, to round out the big 4, we've so far we've done the Harry Potter series, the Cormoran Strike series, Casual Vacancy. The other one is I put it as the 4th of the big 4 here because it's a collaborative work. Rowling didn't really write Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, but we got to think that she was in on the planning of it, and there's no way that the existence of Delphine isn't a defining point in the book. I mean, she's the bad guy. Rounding out the big 4 then. We're left with the blockbuster stage sensation, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. If there's a stretch in the set of big 4 traps, this is the one. I'm going to throw this one at you, Nick, because I don't want to deal with it. I seriously, I don't think I've read Harry Potter and the Cursed Child more than once. I've gone back to hunt. Certainly for this post, I had to go back and hunt for quotations and stuff, but I really haven't read it straight through and studied. I certainly never have outlined its structure. I haven't done any of the work that I normally do with the Potter work because it's collaborative. And I learned after the first Fantastic Beasts film, don't do that. There's just too much stuff you don't know. But how can the conception of Delphine be considered a pregnancy trap or coercive love?
That's a trap, John. That's a coercive question.
That's right. Let me put the screws in your thumbs. There you go.
You've not only thrown me a non-J.K. Rowling work, you've also used all of the excuses that I was going to give you to explain why I couldn't answer it.
Okay.
The short answer, John, is no. There is no pregnancy trap in The Cursed Child. However, so the pregnancy, of course, the foundation crime, the central crime of the novel is the conception of Delphine. And you could argue at a stretch. So both Bellatrix and Voldemort wanted the pregnancy for different reasons. So they both had different goals, and they weren't necessarily entirely open to their partners as to why. You could also, of course, argue it was a completely loveless union. I mean, you have Voldemort, who is clearly incapable of love, and you have Bellatrix, who, if she is capable of
Big
love,
question
is
mark.
only capable is only capable in the most twisted understanding of that term. So you've got two different reasons. Voldemort essentially is going analog. He's going old school in terms of immortality, and doing it the way we've been doing it since Adam was around. So to pass on his genes to at least the next generation.
Does Hermione call it the ultimate Horcrux? Who calls it the ultimate Horcrux?
That doesn't spring to mind, but it's an excellent line.
I think that is from the book. Anyway. But what is Bellatrix's motivation?
So Bellatrix is not a natural mother. Although I think, as you point out in your article, if we had known back then that she was a mother, that Molly Weasley showdown with her would have taken on an entirely different light. But she is extremely jealous of her position with the Dark Lord. And to be the mother of the Dark Lord's offspring, even in secret, would have been a huge boost to her own ego. So this was a matter of positioning and importance for her. So you could argue that they were both coercing their partner for different reasons.
Using the other person. I mean, to her, to use what Charlotte Campbell attributes to Iego's mother, that the Dark Lord is using her as a fucking incubator. And she's using him as a means to secure her own place. It's a power move. It's a power, it's to secure her relationship to power. It's almost like, she doesn't have any children with her own husband, but she has a child with the Dark Lord, according to this the sequel.
I love the parallel you've drawn with Jago and Charlotte to Voldemort and Bellatrix. I think that's quite powerful.
Well, I'm glad you think so, because if we can somehow make this into a coercive love thing, then I have my ink black heart coercive love element. But this, as you say, a pregnancy trap per se. Bellatrix isn't getting a ring out of this. She's already married, and she's not getting any of the conventional ideas. But she is going to get. She will be married to the Dark Lord in ways much more palpable and worthy of exchange in the community of the Death Eaters than anything else. So no other woman has that kind of relationship with the Dark Lord. So yeah, I'm gonna check that box that in the four big things that we have. Her autobiographical piece, in Casual Vacancy, in the Harry Potter series, which is, I think will always be her most famous, most popular work, in the Strike series, which is going to be her longest work to date, and I think most mature and most important, frankly. We have that in Leah Strike at its foundation, and in the catalog we'll go through in a minute. And even in the stage play, a totally different medium, at the foundation of it, we have a very odd pregnancy that is loveless. Two people, I think, frankly, incapable of love, having a child to advance their own causes. And the child is left, of course, at the end with nothing. The child is left with no parents and grows up in a loveless way and becomes a psychopath that drives the whole story. It's a repeat, in a way, of the Merope-Gaunt foundation to the Harry Potter series. It's very much like Rowling to put the pregnancy trap at the finish of, at the sequel, the supposed closing off of all ties in the Harry Potter series, with a book which is founded in a pregnancy trap. It in a way, it secures the Merope-Gaunt pregnancy trap as the foundation crime of the Harry Potter series.
So we've got key pregnancy traps in her four major works, but It seems clear from what you've written, John, that if there is one work where she really lets rip and explores this theme of both coercive love and pregnancy traps, it's within the Strike Ellicott series. I mean, to the point, actually, it wouldn't fit in one post. You had to
Yeah,
split your posts just to try and
yeah,
list.
and I'm not going to do much more here than just to list them. Um, and some are very weak. As much as these things are deliberate, as much as these things are stated as traps inside the works, or that you have to sort of tease it out once you're looking for them, you see them. Um, my count with, if you count Lita Strike, and I'm again, I'm more and more hesitant about thinking of Lita Strike's relationship with Rokeby as coercive love or a true pregnancy trap. I just don't think it was deliberate, as you point out. She's just not that calculating. Um, is I've got 14 instances of coercive love slash pregnancy traps for inside the 7 Strike novels that we have so far. We're averaging, 2 critical pregnancy traps per book. Um, and if you don't like the quality of some of these, I think I'll say take any 3 or 4 of these, 5 or 6 of these out, and you're still left with 8 or 9. I mean, this is a lot of pregnancy traps. This is the series which really nails down the pregnancy trap plot point as a golden thread in Rowling's work. And again, I'm not. I want to really encourage people that there's 2 posts. One is called 4 Strikes, which is the first 4 Strike books, and the second post is called The Last Strikes. The I should have said The Last Strike threes, But anyway, that I want you to read those posts if you really want a long discussion of these, because each one of the traps I discuss, the evidence for them, especially for the ones that have to be teased out. But let's just go through them. The first one is the one we get in the first pages of Cuckoo's Calling, and that is Charlotte Campbell's seeming pregnancy. Now, Strike nowhere, actually in one place in Cuckoo's Calling, he says that, she got pregnant and she had an abortion. That's the only time he says that. I think it's like page 40 or something of Cuckoo's Calling. But we don't learn until, really after Charlotte's death that Strike thinks that she got pregnant in order to win him back from the agency, to put the focus back on her where it belonged. And his response to her pregnancy was not what she expected. He wanted to investigate her and get the times figured out and stuff. But we don't know what happened there. It's a big piece of the Charlotte Campbell was murdered, not committed suicide pieces that we just don't know. There's so many things unresolved about the Charlotte Campbell storyline, specifically about that pregnancy, that we don't know. But I think it has to be included on a list of any list of pregnancy traps in the Strike series, because it's right at the start. I think we get notes about that in their breakup even before Robin reads the Wikipedia article about Lita Strike and Cormoran's conception. So we'll start with that one. That's a pretty big deal, because the Charlotte Campbell thing runs obviously through every book of the series. Then also in Cuckoo's Calling, we have Marlene Higson's trap to win Josiah. Agumon? How do you pronounce that name, Nick? Agumon. I'll go with that.
Agumon, I think.
I forget how the narrator, who I love, pronounces that name. But she doesn't say it was a pregnancy trap. She tries to suggest it was, just a happy love story, that this guy was always coming by and seeing her and helping her with things. But I think she saw him as a catch. He was a university student, which put him in a class above her. He spoke with probably a BBC accent, and he was a gentleman. And as the newspapers reported about Marlene Higson, all her neighbors said she was a whore. She was just turning tricks for money, with her children. She has 2 other sons as well. And I think we can assume, and this is one of those things where you don't see it until you're looking for the pregnancy trap, because there's so many of them. You don't see it until you're thinking, well, she was trying to trap him. And he goes back to Africa, and she moves and doesn't leave any way for him to follow her. It's suggested by his son, in his deathbed confession, that he might have a half sister or a half brother, that he went to look for her. He says she just disappeared. So it worked in a way. He came back to look for her, and that he was going to do the right thing. But she gave up on it and moved on to her boyfriend that sired her other two children. So that again, and that's pretty obviously that's pretty central to the whole story. That because if Lulu doesn't have a half brother, there's no story, there's no murder, there's no she doesn't get thrown from the roof. Okay, so for Cuckoo's Calling, you've got the Campbell Strike trap and you've got the Higson argument trap. Moving on to the Silkworm, which is really the first book in the series, you get the bizarre relationship of Fenella Waldegrave and Michael Fancourt, the author. Michael Fancourt's wife commits suicide in what is the foundation crime of that book, that seminal book. And he has an affair with Jerry Waldegrave's wife, Fenella. Jerry clearly believes that his daughter, whom he adores, with Fenella is not his own daughter. And this is the agony of his relationship with Fenella. Certainly something that he's never gotten over was that she pursued Michael Fancourt, and Michael Fancourt left that relationship and left Fenella broken because his publisher told him to leave. That's why he originally leaves the publisher that he comes back to in Silkworm. This is a part of the foundation crime of the thing because it's how Strike figures out that Owen Quine didn't write Bombyx Mori because he would have known that Michael Fancourt was sterile and that Fenella's child couldn't have been Michael Fancourt's. But that Quine does that means that Quine knew that and couldn't have written that means that somebody else wrote Bombyx Mori, and that's how Strike, that's his clue that opens up the case for him. The mystery of this if it's to be a trap, it has to be Fenella Waldegrave wanting to become pregnant with a celebrated author and leave her editor husband, who's a very nice man, but no great shakes in the London scene, as it were. But neither Fenella nor Jerry ever get a pregnancy test to see if Jerry is the father. So Jerry's left hanging all through these years, thinking that Michael Fancourt may be the father. Now this takes on another dimension in that the child of Fenella and Jerry, supposedly of Michael, is named Joe, and she's a novelist. And so you're left, if you're looking at this through this Lake lens, you immediately are kind of startled by that. That Joe, and I think has a woman novelist whose father and mother don't get along because of the circumstances of her conception. I mean, we'll come back to that, but there's some unhappiness about Fenella Waldegrave's thing. Michael Fancourt certainly isn't caught. He just leaves her. He knows he's not the father of the child, though he never tells them that he's effectively sterile. Fenella and Jerry don't investigate it. So again, it's an odd pregnancy trap, but I think Fenella was looking to trade up. Okay, moving on to Career of Evil. Okay, Donnie Lang. Donnie Lang is the fruit of Mrs. Lang, separated from her husband, has an affair with one of the local policemen. That's all we learn about him, is he's one of the local policemen. And we don't even learn her name. She never says anything. She's got advanced Alzheimer's by the time that Strike tracks her down. But it's clear when she reconciles with her husband that he knows that child is not his. And he hates her, hates her and him. And the other children, his siblings, Donnie Lang's children, they hate him as well. Because it's a sign of his mother's, adultery and infidelity, even though they were separated at the time. And Lang grows up as just a hated child. Mrs. Lang hates him because obviously, he's the cause of the abuse she gets from her husband, and the husband hates him because it's a sign of his being a cuckold. I mean, Donnie Lang is who he is because of a pregnancy trap that failed. Okay, and that's the big one of Career of Evil. The other one we get inside the Career of Evil is the inverse trap. Lita Strike was incapable of we think, me following your lead here, Nick, that Lita was just incapable of that kind of calculation, that kind of deliberate strike, as it were, on somebody else.
Yeah.
And Jeff Whitaker is not incapable of that kind of deliberation. And Strike clearly believes that his mother becomes pregnant with the child, more than 10 years after her conception of Lucy, because Whitaker wants access to the money that Strike and Lucy's fathers are giving her. He thinks there are hidden millions that he's about to trap. And again, it doesn't work out. And certainly the mystery of Leah Strike's death is going to turn on that pregnancy trap. About that child somehow. But I don't know what that will be. But there's just simply no way that Leah Strike, I don't think she could possibly have committed suicide when she had a child that she was taking care of. Yeah.
It's strange we haven't met him yet. We're right at the back end of
don't you think that's going to be consequent to Strike's coming to terms with his own conception, his meeting with Rokeby and finding out that his parents actually had a relationship?
Or at least a journey towards that, maybe.
And that will make Strike look back at what happened to his mother, that she wasn't someone that sprang a trap. She was someone who was caught in a trap. And what happened to that baby? Especially if it has any kind of relationship with Robin, if she's not caught in a pregnancy trap herself, and if Strike hasn't been caught in a pregnancy trap, he isn't the child of this thing. Maybe all of those pregnancy traps being sprung will make him think about his half-brother via Jeff Whitaker.
Do you think all of this will get worked out in a neonatal unit somewhere?
Yeah, seriously, to have Strike in a maternity ward, looking at his child with Bijou Watkins. Can you imagine the self-reflection this man will finally be brought to? One hopes Robin will be at his side, but maybe she'll be in the maternity ward getting a checkup. She'll be there to get her second trimester meeting with her GP. Anyway, or OBGYN. So anyway, so that's the Donnie Lang and the Jeff Whitaker pregnancy traps are a big deal in Career of Evil, but they don't compare to the two that we get. Again, we get a pregnancy trap in Lethal White. We find out, in pieces throughout the book, that Jasper Chisel is captured in a pregnancy trap by Ornella Seraphin, the Orca. That this journalist gets a minister of the realm as the father of her child, and her son Raphael, of course, turns out to be the murderer. That he grows up in an unhappy home because Jasper Chisel gets custody of the child somehow and raises him. His siblings hate him and abuse him. Clearly that's the whole Horse of Uffington scene. The pregnancy trap again is at the foundation of the book. The murderer is conceived in a pregnancy trap. Donnie Lang, etc. So this is. Again, the foundational part of a pregnancy trap. And what does that pregnancy trap do? He takes his stepmother, Kinvara, his father's wife, and uses coercive love to compel her to murder her father, to be part of the conspiracy to fake a suicide with Jasper Chisel. And,
this is very Greek tragedy, isn't it?
Well, we've been touching on the incest thing, which is I think a golden thread as well. But certainly the Oedipal elements of Raffi. What does he say? In his final confrontation with Robin on the boat, he said, he says it's going to be pretty hard to convince her that her Raffi doesn't love her because I basically had her reciting it while I was screwing her. That this was going on. Talk about a man incapable of love. I think it's Robin that while he's talking about how he murdered his father, how he was only concerned about how difficult it was for him, rather than the fact that he was murdering his father. This is a real psychopath that we're talking about, and he certainly has, just like his mother, he certainly has the gene, or you will, or the capacity to compartmentalize his emotions, whatever you want to call it, to deliberately manipulate someone sexually to their ends. Clearly his thing about Kinvara is not so much that he wants to murder his father for revenge, though there's no love lost there between Jasper and Raphael. But he's after the money. He's after that Stubbs painting, and he's willing to use people the way the Dark Lord used people to create Horcruxes. But again, if not necessarily a pregnancy trap, Kinvara may be on the other side of menopause when their relationship happens. But we certainly have someone using sexual intimacy to secure a relationship for advantage. It will secure Raphael's financial security forever if he can get that Stubbs painting. So the first four books, we've got Campbell Strike, we've got Marlene Hickson and Joseph Eigenman, we've got Fenella Waldegrave, Michael Fancourt, we got Mrs. Lang and the policeman, we got Jeff Whitaker and Lita, Ornella and Jasper and Raphael and Kinvara. There's a lot there, but it picks up. It picks up in the. We get more in the last three per book. We get. I neglected this. I had to put it in a comment on the post. I've got all these notes on pregnancy traps, so I'm going through the books. And the one that I think actually spurred me to think about this as a golden thread when I was writing my PhD dissertation was the Luca Ricci trap of Gloria Conti. Again, the man trapping a woman in the pregnancy, which is the foundation crime of Troubled Blood, is that he traps her in that pregnancy, manipulates her into that pregnancy, and Margot Bamborough becomes the agent of Gloria Conti's abortion. And post-mortem, I think, becomes the agent of Gloria Conti's escape of Luca Ricci, whose name parses to something like Satan. That pregnancy trap is we don't find out until the interview with Gloria Conti after the year that the contract was to investigate the story. And yet that reveals everything as to what's really going on here, because she was held up by Theo, by God, and instead of doing the right thing to help that woman who has an ectopic pregnancy, which is to take her immediately to a clinic, because there's nothing with an ectopic pregnancy can be done other than to abort the child. The place where everyone, I think, concurs that an abortion is necessary to save the life of the mother. That is, Margot Bamborough doesn't do that. She does aid and abet a prenatal infanticide when it comes to Gloria Conti, who didn't need to have her child murdered to escape the UK and Luca Ricci. And then she doesn't help when God comes to visit her, Theo comes to visit her, in a case where abortion is necessary. She doesn't help that person, which almost certainly results in the death of God. And that failing on Margot Bamborough results in her being captured by Janice Beatty and cemented into a piece of furniture, much like a pearl. Her name means pearl, to rest there until Strike figures out the story. So the Luca Ricci pregnancy trap is the heart and soul of what I think is the best single book that Rowling has written. I have great love for The Christmas Pig, but seriously, the depth of the artistry and the challenges inside Troubled Blood make it that. And the heart of it is a pregnancy trap. We also we learn about Sarah Shadlock and Matt Cunliffe in Lethal White, but we don't really get the trap until Troubled Blood. And that's basically the end of the Matt Cunliffe storyline. He's married off now. Sarah Shadlock has won. She's pregnant. They're gonna go to Masham and at Christmas time. That's done. I always have hope that the flubberworm will come back, as Louise Freeman likes to call him. He's such a wonderful. He's the character everybody loves to hate. He has the most disgusting name. I just love Matt Cunliffe.
But is this the example of the successful pregnancy trap? If you can call two ghastly people being joined together in unholy wedlock a successful pregnancy trap?
Because the child's Robin admits that Matt will be a wonderful father to a conventional child. And Sarah will certainly dote on the child, and I'm confident she'll be faithful to Matt. Though, the axiom that cheaters will always cheat, but who knows? But yeah, if in all these sets that we have of coercive love and pregnancy traps, Sarah Shadlock seems to have worked it properly. Again, how you work a crime properly. There we go. The child will not grow up to be a psychopath, you hope, even though, what is it, Strike says if two shits have a child, is it necessarily a shit, We hope not. Let's hope that Sarah Shadlock's child escapes that, because there'll be a loving environment. All right. And also inside Troubled Blood, we learn at the very end of the book, in the Red Room, which, if you know detective fiction, the Red Room is always, Red Room is murder backwards. The murderer is going to be in the Red Room. When they have their tell-all meeting in the Red Room, Janice Beatty admits that she's been wearing this wedding ring, but she was never married. That her son was conceived with a man she was trying to get to marry her, but he never did. And he eventually left her because, doggone it, she was trying to kill him. And he figured that out. But the father... It's always
the little things, isn't it? It's always the little things.
I think Judge Judy would say, okay, divorce, the separation at least. But but what a bad dad he leaves his son with this woman, clearly his mother, that he believes is trying to kill him. But he leaves, the boy with him. She's not going to try to kill him. Really?
Well, yeah.
Obviously she does. I mean, and that's also one of the reasons that Margot Bamborough is murdered is that she figures out that Beatty's a poisoner. She didn't figure it out in time to not eat the eclair or the ding dong, whatever it was that Janice had juiced, but she knew something was up with those chocolates. So again, pregnancy traps, pregnancy traps, pregnancy traps. We have it with Luca and Gloria, Sarah Shadlock, and Janice Beatty. I mean, what more do you need? In the best book that Rowling has written, Rowling Galbraith certainly, we have 3 pregnancy traps that are just they're in your face pregnancy traps. It's if nothing, that would be almost a golden thread thing of its own, is to say, look at this, look how important this is. And then we get Ink Black Heart, which is, I hoped when I posted this, the last strikes, and I had to say, look, I don't see a coercive love in here. Maybe there is, but the only one I can think of besides the one I talked about is Anamie's manipulation of his partner in the game using a woman,
Via Paperwhite, yeah.
That's a sick kind of coercive love, in that this man who is, I don't know what you call it, he's handicapped, extremely handicapped, though also remarkably gifted, but certainly not someone that would draw the affection of a woman in the street. He's wheelchair bound and all these things. And Anamie creates this online avatar, sends him pictures of this woman in Scotland, and manipulates him into doing what he wants because of the love he creates for this person. One of the sickest things that Anamie does inside the book, maybe the sickest thing, certainly. But I didn't write that one up. The only explicit coercive love relationship that I saw in Ink Black Heart was Charlotte Campbell being manipulated by Diego Ross to have his children. Ross is a sick man, right? I mean, he's a power-hungry, sadistic. He reminds me a lot of the Malfoys. Forgive me. Certainly his hair coloring and posture to the world of privilege certainly has resonances with Lucius Malfoy. I think Diego Ross is meant to be a suggestion of Lucius Malfoy in the books, except for Lucius actually does love his son and his wife. Diego Ross, I think, has to know when Charlotte comes back to him that he's being used. That Charlotte's only come back to him to hurt Strike. He's not. I hope he's not so self-consumed that he thinks that Charlotte has come back to him because he's such a great catch. I think he wants a male child. He wants an heir. He wants to sire a son with this excellent breeding stock. Though, one has to be pretty deranged to think of Charlotte Campbell as excellent breeding stock. But I mean, certainly she was very, in the exterior, she's very beautiful.
I think it was the splash the pair of them made in the popular magazines.
That's right.
That was his main motivation. Yes, he wanted a photogenic heir with a photogenic bride. Had to be of the right family. Had to be of the right class. This is Rowling displaying her class prejudices to full extent here. This is exactly the kind of patrician attitude that, you're right, we do see in the Malfoys. That this was evident from the first chapters of Philosopher's Stone.
Well, Charlotte, in the confrontation in Ink Black Heart, where Strike reveals all the scandalous material that he's gathered on Diego Ross's abuse of his children, and how he's going to free himself and his agency from their shit show, in his phrase. Charlotte at that point says, when he confronts her later about this, or maybe it was well before that, it was when she comes to him to ask for his help. She says, I'm not just a fucking incubator like Diego's mother says I am. I'm the mother of the heir of the hereditary position he has. As you said, she preens herself at that point as, I'm aristocracy. Now remember, she's the daughter of a newscaster. I'm really having a hard time understanding this as aristocracy or anything. Maybe it's just aristocracy of wealth, but she's certainly not a born patrician in terms of like that Jago Ross is.
Her father was a knight of the realm.
Was he a knight of the realm consequent to his work on television, or was he? You can't be born to a knight of the realm, can you?
No, no, not a knight of the realm. There is. You get a very similar title with the baronetcy, but I don't think that's what he's got. I don't think it's hereditary.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Is that she may be to the manner born, and that she was born in a moneyed class, more of an American aristocracy idea than a British one. And Ross represents landed gentry in a way that Campbell doesn't. But yeah, they're a match made in hell. But it's I think we can qualify Ross's love for Charlotte Campbell as in some sense coercive. That he brutalized her before he sends her off to Simmons' house. He beats her. She has a black eye that Amelia's going to testify to. Certainly he's not going to let her go except on his terms. And that to me qualifies as coercive love. If you want to say, John, throw that one away, that's ridiculous. Okay. That's the only thing I got beside Enemy and Paperwhite in For Ink Black Heart, which is a novel I just don't know that well.
Enemy and Paperwhite is interesting because it is the only example we've got in the series so far of catfishing. I don't know if you know the phrase of catfishing.
Explain.
So this is where you, using digital communication, you purport essentially to be somebody else for the purposes of coercive love. So you pretend to be, in its most hackneyed form, I guess, a Nigerian prince, and then you set up social media to that effect, and then you try and entrap women into long distance relationship, usually asking for money. Well, there's an American TV show called, I think, Catfishing.
Wow.
Forgive me, it's not my kind of television, but we do know that Rowling is a fan of that show. So
how do we know that?
So she has tweeted, and she has a favorite episode as well, which again, forgive me, I haven't watched, but
You're light years ahead of me. I don't even watch. I don't have a TV, so I don't have any idea how to do this. But anyway, this is so funny. Okay, so explain how Enemy's thing is catfishing.
So it's catfishing essentially because Enemy has set up this fake profile within the game for Paperwhite. It wouldn't be classical catfishing yet, but it's the appropriation of somebody else's, a real person's photograph, to pass off as your own, and that is the hallmark of catfishing.
This is the second thing this morning I realized that I neglected in my series. I guess this is just the jumping off point. These first 7 posts are not the complete catalog, but are the introduction to the complete catalog on pregnancy traps. That's great. Catfishing. I have to learn. Something for me to learn today. This is good. I'm going to move on to Running Grave, in which I think we have 3 pregnancy traps. Only one of which is on the surface of the story. The foundational pregnancy trap, we've got 3 pregnancy traps inside Running Grave, only one of which is on the surface. But the most important one, the foundational one, the Merope Gaunt one, is Mazu Wace's pregnancy trap for Alex Graves. Alex Graves is mentally ill, mental illness exacerbated by the smoking of marijuana. He gets community service at all places. He gets sent to the Almerton farm. And we don't know the timing exactly, but it seems that Jonathan Wace is already there. His wife has died, and he's in some kind of relationship with Mazu. It's pretty clear that the child that they have, who becomes the drowned prophet, and whose murder is the impetus for the entire series, really, the entire series of murders and madness inside Running Grave. So the origin of the UHC, really. I mean, the foundation crime, the inciting incident to the UHC and Strike's involvement in this is the murder of Dayu Wace. But Dayu Wace herself only exists because of Mazu Wace trapping Alex Graves. Now, at this point, Almerton Farms is being broken up. Mazu Wace is the daughter of a prostitute and the Crowther brothers, who are the pedophiles in charge of the commune that Strike's nightmare history. And she's the agent of Lucy's abuse as a child by the doctor on the thing. So Mazu's a piece of work herself, and she hooks it into Alex Graves, as Alex Graves' father says, gets her hooks into Alex when he's doing community service there. Obviously, he's an easy mark. Doesn't have women come up to him. He's mentally ill. He's in recovery. But he's a very wealthy man because of the trust from the brewery that his grandfather started. His great grandfather. That conception is there's a hint that Jonathan Weiss and Mazu Weiss are already in a relationship, and that it's their twin machination to get Alex Graves thing. But Dayu Weiss looks so much like a Graves. She has that lapine dental feature, the protruding front teeth. So we're pretty confident that Dayu Weiss really is the daughter of Alex Graves. But there's enough question about it that Jonathan Weiss, I think, is relieved that Dayu dies and her remains are never found to be tested. Because if Dayu is not the son of Alex Graves, then they lose all the money that Mazu and daughter inherited at the hanged prophet's death gave them. But again, the pregnancy trap where Mazu puts her hooks into Alex Graves and secures that relationship and the inheritance, that's really at the bottom of everything that happens inside Running Grave. Jonathan Weiss invents out of this whole coercive love thing. Coercive love is the rule of the United Humanitarian Church.
Institutionalized coercion.
Because
yeah.
I mean, his product that funds a lot of what the church does is the black market baby selling operation, where families that can't have children will buy children from the UHC, and that celebrities come and get sexually serviced at their commune, and the pregnancies that result are sold off, or the pregnancies that result among the people inside the UHC True Believers are sold off, with Mama Mazu being the decision maker in all this for their names and their destination and such. All of that goes back to the Alex Graves pregnancy trap. So that's the foundation one. The in-your-face pregnancy trap is Belinda Watkins' trap for Andrew Humboldt, QC. I assume we still call him QC, even though
I know they're
KCs.
They're KCs now.
But in the book, he's a QC. So, and this trap that she lays for Andrew Humboldt, we get from the opening pages of Running Grave. That, Ilsa is telling Robin right from the start, this shameless woman named Belinda, but everyone calls Bijou because she tells them to, because, it's racier, with her, silicone breasts and you assume other cosmetic surgery. She's there trying to get this match with Andrew Humboldt for a jump up in station and in finances. Apparently Andrew Humboldt has done very well. I guess all QCs are that wealthy. Is there healthy?
Oh no, by no means. So yeah, some QCs, particularly those that are working in commercial law or particularly tax law, can be extremely well paid. If you're relying on litigation in normal criminal court, and you're relying on state aid to fund your work, it is very poorly paid.
Andrew Humboldt, I guess, is on the one side of that thing. I mean, he moves out of his wife's home, their family home. He has 4 children, and he moves into a palatial apartment where Strike visits him. Clearly, she has her sights on him, and failing her ability to land Andrew Humboldt, she has Cormoran Strike also in her sights. And that's right up front. That's a big part of the story, especially Strike's, again, just shameless use of the woman for sexual gratification or sexual act out his frustrations about Ryan and Robin, which brings us to the last pregnancy trap, and the one that probably gets the most. I don't follow Strike fandom because I don't know, I'm a snob, I'm lazy, I don't know. probably because, Nick, you do it so well. I don't have to do that. But I suspect, and please confirm or deny this, that the possibility that Ryan Murphy is trying to trap Robin Ellicott via a pregnancy is a subject of conversation.
So it has been mentioned. I think surprising considering the number of pregnancy traps appearing in the series. It hasn't had anything like the amount of attention I think it
That's
deserves.
great. That's great. I assume that Murphy is so obviously enamored of Robin, almost unhinged, and determined to win her that the idea of pulling the goalie or somehow spiking his condom somehow or something that so that she would become pregnant, that just seems like a no-brainer to me. Whoops. We had a passionate thing, and
So I think most people are talking about the revelation that we've had of Murphy's previous alcoholism and how that's going to play out to destroy the relationship, rather than any particular machinations that he may have to
okay,
try and
well,
maintain it.
we can toss this one then too. I assume this was a comment. Maybe because I spent the better part of 4 months reviewing this, 3 months reviewing this material. I thought, well, that one's obvious. We've got Ryan Murphy saying at the beginning of the book, "It suits you" when she's carrying a child, and then his taking her to bed as soon as she's back from the commune. Here she's got PTSD, and he's taking her to bed. I'm just
I think it certainly has been noted. I think particularly because those chapters were released early in the sort of the
right.
sneak peek prior to publication. So people really did focus on that, as you say, the image of Robin with the baby. I haven't seen a tremendous amount of conversation since.
For me, we leave the office at the end of book 7, much in a way reminiscent of the opening scene of not the murder scene, not the prologue, but the first chapter of Cuckoo's Calling. On the landing there with Strike and Robin. And in the first one, he knocks her over, almost kills her, grabs her by the breast. She gets to be the Robin Redbreast joke. And here she goes down those same stairs in a fall that is much worse, and Strike doesn't save her. He sends her off to make her own choice whether she wants to come to him. And here, instead of being Matt Cunliffe, we have another man that's determined to nail her down. That he's taking her off. He's going to propose to her, and he's going to pull the goalie. He's going to try to, if she doesn't accept his proposal, then he'll, because of his obsessive mindset, he'll do what he needs to do to win her. And certainly she's a person who could be shamed into marriage, I think. Maybe not. Maybe she'll say no. Maybe she'll have an abortion. That Robin has shown that has said that in case of, if she had become pregnant with the rape, infanticide was her go-to option. She was not going to carry that child to term. So maybe she would do that if Murphy did this. Wouldn't that be kind of a sobering finish to the series? Strike telling Bijou to have an abortion, and Ellicott going to the clinic, to get rid of Ryan's baby. Whew, what a heartwarming finish. So just to go through this all, we've got 14 traps. Campbell on Strike, Hickson on Aguiman, Fenella on Fancourt, Mrs. Lang, the policeman, Jeff Whitaker and Lita, Ornella and Jasper, Raphael and Guevara, Luca and Gloria, Sarah and Matt, Janice and her son's father, Diego and Charlotte, Mazu and Alex, Belinda and Andrew Humboldt, and finally the possible trap of Ryan and Robin.
We're not crazy calling this a theme, are we, John?
If you take those 14 on top of the big four, seriously, there's more. Pregnancy. So I think we can draw the line here, sum it up. Pregnancy traps are evident in Rowling's work in both a qualitative fashion and a quantitative way. Only fake suicides that are actually murders come up as often, and usually in the lives of the murderers a la the Dark Lord's conception. But what about the stray pieces? Okay, we've covered the big stuff. The play, the Potter series, the Strike series, Casual Vacancy, which is only becoming more and more important to Rowling readers. Um, what about the stray pieces in Rowling's oeuvre? The Fantastic Beasts screenplays that she wrote collaboratively for Warner Brothers, and the two children's stories, the Ickabog and the Christmas Pig. I mean,
John, we're talking essentially about rape and pregnancy. You're going to give me two kids'
I
books
love,
and
yeah,
Hollywood movies that Rowling was essentially taken off
that's
the
right.
sole writing
Okay,
floor and
I
haven't
mean,
even finished.
this is why I get to write the questions for the show, Nick. Is I could, they kick this one over. But hey, I wrote the post. I was the one who had to go through
That's
this.
true.
But you've managed to. I mean, people have to go back and read the post to understand how much you've improved on the post that I've written. I mean, you've had some wonderful insights here. Tell me what you got out of
I,
what I wrote about
uh,
Fantastic Beasts, the Ichabod, and the Christmas
okay.
Pig, coercively.
So so Fantastic Beasts is the easiest one because there are some very clear examples taking the lead from the Merope Gaunt Wizarding World original pregnancy trap. We've got Queenie and Jacob, which I find a really strange one. Now we don't know what the spell or potion was that Queenie used to enchant Jacob because Jacob was already in love with Queenie. But through whatever magical means, she made Jacob compliant to essentially leave New York, travel with Queenie with a view to getting married. So the dialogue we have is, why is it wrong to want to marry you, to want to have a family? I just want what everyone else has, that's all. They're really progressive here and they'll let us get married properly. Now, that was coercive. The love was already there, but the action to break the rules, which Jacob clearly didn't want to do, much as it pained him, was coercive. But we have an even more classical entrapment with the conception of Leta Lestrange. And you could argue, actually, is this the foundation crime of the Fantastic Beasts series, or was it the Ariana potential rape was and we don't know because, as I say, Rowling wasn't sole writer. The film series hasn't been finished. Until we can persuade J.K. Rowling to novelize what was in her mind for this series, we probably never will know. But Leta Lestrange, her conception was sex even worse than Amortentia. It was under the Imperious
The
curse.
unforgivable curse.
The unforgivable curse. And if so, clearly that was a loveless union that created Leta Lestrange. You could argue that Leta wasn't incapable of love, but certainly her conception was under those circumstances. But if she hadn't been born, actually, we wouldn't have Credence. We wouldn't have
That's
Credence
right.
coming to New York.
There's no Aurelius. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you could argue that that's a foundation crime. Now for the kids' books, obviously it's a little more difficult trying to find something. There is, of course, within Christmas Pig a clear pregnancy trap. I mean, other than that clear pregnancy trap in the Christmas Pig, that book is devoid of. You're looking shocked, John. The pregnancy.
Yeah, my jaw is in my lap.
The
The clear pregnancy trap of
pregnancy trap.
Christmas Pig.
Well, we have a young lady whose relationship is broken with a young man. In order to get back in his good books, foists essentially a surrogate child on him, the Christmas Pig.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
If it if
Um,
it if it wasn't for that crime, then we would never have had Jack coming back into the land of the lost. I'm being facetious, of course, but similar kind of dynamic. This CP was not wanted. Jack did not want CP. He was mourning the loss of his child, DP, who Holly had murdered just shortly before.
wow. Okay. I mean, hats off, Nick. That's brilliant. I love it. I love it. All I got all I got for the Christmas pig was Natalia Macaulay's coercive love for her daughter, which is a stretch.
Yeah.
Um, that that the love that Holly's mother feels for her is definitely conditional and coercive. If she's not doing well in gymnastics, then her mother only gives her disapproval and angst. And Holly is shattered by her father's departure. He wants his unconditional love and his real empathy for her. I mean, he gives her a guitar at the finish of the book
Yeah.
because he's on sync with what she really wants rather than what he wants and what his ex-wife wants for her. But other than that coercive love, it's hard to see coercive love inside that.
Yeah.
Boy, but I'm never going to be able to look at poor Holly and Jack's relationship again without thinking, she got him. She gave him
Yeah.
that unwanted child, man,
Yeah.
and he
And this is
he had to come to
this is
terms with it.
this is only the second example we've got in Rowling's work of a successful pregnancy trap as well.
Well,
Because essentially,
go on. I'm sorry.
I mean, essentially, at the end of Christmas Pig, you have Holly and Jack have a great relationship. Jack has adopted CP. Holly's got exactly what she wanted.
But Queenie and Jacob, you just described as a successful pregnancy trap or of some kind of coercive love.
Well, again, we don't know where that's going to end up, but certainly where we see it, we have Queenie and Jacob on a break.
I thought that there's a Kowalski, Quidditch player in one of the playing cards or something like that, so we know that Queenie and Jacob wind up together.
Yeah, yeah. I guess, but well, we know that a Kowalski ends up with someone.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we also have a Goldstein in Hogwarts.
That's true. That's true.
So we got one more left, haven't we? We've got the Ickabog, and there's a pregnancy in the Ickabog, but that's a pregnancy via parthenogenesis. So that can't be in and of itself coercive. But we've got some coercive examples of coercive love, which in your article you've pointed out, and the obvious one is Spittleworth.
That's right.
So Spittleworth has taken a shine to Lady Islander. And we can see him sort of positioning himself. He manages to get King Fred to back off, and it ends up essentially that he kidnaps Lady Islander. Now, of course, it's a kid's book, but kidnapping the object of your affection, I guess, is as close as we're going to come to what coercive love is going to look like in a fairy story, political or not.
Yeah, and Rowling presents it right at the start of the Ickabog. It's the second page of the book. Fred didn't know that Lord Spittleworth had a grudge against Lady Islanda. He'd once asked her to marry him, but she'd turned him down. I mean, that's right at the foundation of the thing. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal. But it's. Did you find something else there?
No, that's all I found, John.
Okay, the one you clearly didn't like this one, so I'm going to bring it up so you can tell me why you didn't like it. And that is the Aberforth Dumbledore siring of Credence Aurelius. We're told almost, again, this is the collaborative thing. We don't really know from that script. And Albus, forgive me, I'm not a screenplay fan. I really burned myself out on the first screenplay, when I found out that there were, 15 to 20 scenes that were cut from the shooting script, which were obviously part of the original script. And, what we got was, the producer's idea of what the story was rather than Rowling's. So what we got in the Secrets of Dumbledore screenplay about the relationship that, he says, the summer, this is Albus talking, the summer Gellert and I fell in love. My brother fell in love as well with a girl from the Hollow. She was sent away. There were rumors about a child. Credence is a Dumbledore. Had I been a better friend to Aberforth, if I had been a better brother, he might have confided in me. Perhaps things would have been different. This boy could have been part of our lives, part of our family. Now, remember, this is the 19th century, I assume, that this happens. It's just odd, the whole thing. There were rumors about a child. Credence is a Dumbledore. That whole girl from the Hollow. Did the girl from the Hollow spring a trap on Aberforth Dumbledore, and his parents say no? Well, but obviously they took the child from her to send her to the United States, right? I mean, this is such an odd thing, and there's so many holes there. How did Credence wind up on the
Yeah.
boat to America? Was she a Muggle or was she a witch? I mean, is it really conceptually plausible that the Dumbledore parents, exiled their first and only grandchild? I mean, especially considering their daughter's condition, um, and the mother's family. Anyway,
Again, we just don't know.
yeah, I'm really disappointed with the screenplay. That's an essential part of that entire series, and to have it in just a throwaway conversation between Dumbledore and Scamander, um, very disappointing. Though that's kind of my default posture to everything to do with this the Fantastic Beasts film series is very disappointing. As you said, we're only going to
Well,
hope for the novels to someday come out.
yeah, I mean, we need to understand we're too short, so we never got the final two, or to date at least, we haven't got the final two films. That last script wasn't Rowling's script, even before they started chopping scenes out
Wow.
to
Yeah.
fit the playtime.
Yeah. May it rest in peace. But again, we see as you say, with the conception of Leda, um, the core part of the series is that, and we have Queenie and Jacob's relationship being somewhat coercive. So Fantastic Beasts, Ickabog, and Christmas Pig. No matter however you choose to stretch that, I love your Holly and Jack coercive love thing, but that completes the set, right? I mean, what?
So in terms of fourth generation Rowling studies, so we've got a thread. Okay, some of them are stretches, but we seem to have a theme that is running through all of her works, and that's what we call a golden thread,
Right.
right? Something that runs through all her work. So pregnancy trap as a completion, or at least coercive love, appears in everything. It's usually in the form of a woman trapping a man. Sometimes it's the reverse, with an aim to cementing a relationship, probably through marriage via the conception of a child. This is a theme. So what, John?
We've come to that point
What
in the
does that
show,
mean?
Nick, where we say, so what? Um, yeah, yeah. What does it mean? We see this plot point again and again and again. It's beyond pervasive, and it's important. Well, I'm writing this up as a Substack post in its own here, but really I've got three explanations. The first one doesn't have anything to do necessarily with biography, other than Rowling's core beliefs, and that is that the pregnancy trap, as a woman's means to reverse the usual power imbalance and power dynamic in male-female relationships. I mean, really, this is the heart of Rowling's feminist core beliefs, at least as she publicly expresses them. We don't get much expression about her ideas about the soul and this kind of thing, but we do get the feminism on a daily basis. This pervasive plot point that almost becomes a theme in her work about how women can win the male-female relationship power imbalance by trapping a man. That could just be the expression of that core belief, that message that she's trying to deliver about. She wants to bring to everyone's attention this foundational fact of human existence, is that women are at a disadvantage in relationships with men. Just on the facts of sex, men are bigger, stronger, faster than women, and then in the way culture ossifies around that advantage to give men more power, more money, etc. So we can just say it's a feminist trope about power imbalances, and that doesn't go that much into her biography, but somehow Rowling's insists that that's not where her inspiration comes from. That it does come from her core beliefs, but it also comes from psychological issues that her subconscious is wrestling with. That's what inspires her stories. And so we have to ask, what unresolved issue might there be in Rowling's life? So what crisis that Rowling is struggling with would result in a pregnancy trap theme that runs through her books? And we don't have to look very hard. I mean, the bad dad trope, which also runs through the books, points to Rowling perhaps being the product of a pregnancy trap herself, and the consequent very bad relationship that she has with her father. We have a fact. We have a fact on this, right? She was conceived prior to her parents' marriage, months before her parents' marriage. It
Yes.
doesn't seem.
We know we know that they were both in the Royal Navy, or the Royal Navy and the Wrens, the Women's Royal Navy. We know that they were both at the very start of quite a lengthy training program. We know they both left that training program early to get married. We don't know the circumstances around it. We do know that Rowling's talked about her parents wanting a son.
Her father
I don't think
specifically,
I don't
right?
think yeah. I don't think she's ever talked specifically about being unwanted. Necessarily a lot of this is going to be speculation.
but there are some facts. We know that she was
Yeah,
conceived before her parents' marriage. We know that she has a very bad relationship with her father. Her father had a better relationship with Rowling's younger sister than with her. He didn't seem to, transfer that thing to her. We also know, or at least, you've shared this with me. This is not my insight. That his leaving the Royal Navy was a real setback to him in terms of his ambitions,
yeah,
and you'll have to explain that.
yeah.
That's not obvious to Americans. Going
No, so
from an enlisted position to the private sector in the United States is not a loss.
no. I think if he had managed, so he was training to be um, uh, in the Royal Navy what's termed an aircraft artificer. Now this is a very skilled position. You could say within the Royal Navy, it is the most technical trade that you can go into. So he would be trained to maintain and repair aircraft on an aircraft carrier. And the reason why they term these engineers artificers is that you can't have on an aircraft carrier every spare possible that you want. So the point being that these guys were trained to fabricate what they did not have. I mean, really very highly paid, very highly skilled. Her mother was training to be an aircraft mechanic. Now, this was again for a woman, it was the most highly skilled trade that you could go into in terms of technical competence. So this would be rather than on an aircraft carrier in a Royal Naval Air Station, she would be a mechanic on the flight line, looking after the aircraft. At that time, almost uniquely, these flight line mechanics were trained to certify aircraft for
Huh.
airworthiness. This was not an administrative position that she was doing. All of that was stopped abruptly, so neither were qualified, and we know this just simply by the dates. So we can estimate their time of entry by the when they met, and we know, of course, when they got married that they were both out of the service. So we know neither of them qualified. We next find them. She is, of course, a stay-at-home mother, and Peter Rowling is beginning an apprenticeship in Rolls-Royce. So he's gone right back to the bottom of the rung again as an unskilled, untrained
And how
apprentice.
does he get that job?
For a year. Well, his brother was already working for Rolls-Royce. We don't know what position he had. We do know that at the time that the Rowlings were living in Tuts Hill, he had a very nice house in a very nice seaside town. So you could infer that he was
Well,
doing
and he
quite
sends
well.
his children to to public schools.
Yeah, and not just any public schools either, but so his son went to Ampleforth, which is it's considered the Catholic Eton.
Huh.
It is one of the creams of the crop.
So his brother is Catholic, or they just the Catholic Eton accepts non-Catholics as well?
We don't know. It is the
Okay.
short answer. We do know that Rowling's parents got married in a Church of England church, but again, that's not unusual. So the British tradition is that you get married in the parish church of the bride. It's not always followed, but that's largely the position. So if a Catholic man was to marry a Protestant woman, then they would get married in a Protestant church. And that's not to say that the man would have converted or anything. That's just where they got married.
So what you're describing to me seems to strengthen the idea that, or the possibility at least, that Rowling's unresolved issue with her family, what Camille Paglia calls the Freudian family romance, is that her father resented her because her conception, not to say that he resisted the marriage, but it forced him out of a career track which would have been obviously more lucrative and more socially advantageous to him than starting out on the line at a Rolls-Royce factory, a job that he gets, courtesy of his brother, kind of a toss from his brother.
There's always going to be a lot of I don't knows. So we know that Rowling's relationship with her father, to put a very mild gloss on it, is strained. We don't know the reason for that. I mean, but beyond the headlines of the father selling some first edition books, we don't know what the root cause of that trouble was. We do know it goes back many years. We do know from some of the very early biographies, of which I'm not a fan, where some of the neighbours were interviewed. We do know that Peter Rowling, the father, when he managed to buy Tut's Hill,
Church Cottage?
Church Cottage in Tut's Hill. This was sort of a dream come true. This was a very coveted property. So it's an old property. It's not on a housing estate, which is where they were living in the outskirts of Bristol. This is village life rather than city life. So that would tend to indicate some ambition of social mobility. Actually, we visited there when you came to Wales, John, and it's sort of in Tut's Hill, but not in Tut's Hill. It's some distance away from the village
Well,
proper.
tell them about the properties that are next to it. I mean, this is the thing that blew my mind.
So, I mean, right next door is St. Luke's Church, where we know Rowling spent a lot of time as a child. We know she attended services there, and it would seem to be the obvious bolt hole. If you wanted to get out of the house and didn't walk all the way down to the village, then you could go into the next door to that is a great big old manor house, East Cliff. So when we were there, we just saw the walls around the back of the playing fields where Joe certainly would have played as a child, the walls of their walled kitchen garden. We know that the family may not have attended St. Luke's, but certainly recent family members are buried there. So she certainly wouldn't have been in the social circle of that family, but may have known them by sight. She may have walked past their property. So actually the property itself, East Cliff, is set well away from the wall. You can't see it from the road. But there is a public footpath, and we know that Rowling used to walk. It's called Offa's Dyke Way. This is an old ancient earthwork set that used to be the border between England and Wales. And we know that this Offa's Dyke Way footpath actually runs right next to the property. And we know she used to walk that footpath. So we know she's familiar with the footpath, so we can infer that she knew at least by sight this manor house quite well.
And if the speculation here about the pregnancy traps is to say that Rowling herself is the child who was born into if not a loveless marriage, then one that was forced upon the father, forced him out of his hoped for path upward in terms of social mobility, as you put it, and that she lived in the shadow of this manor that may have been a reminder to his father. As much as it was a coveted home to own, it still was in the shadow of the manor.
I mean, when I think of Malfoy Manor and I
Ah.
think of the Chisels sort of faded estate, this is the property I think of.
So I said there were three possible explanations for why we have so many pregnancy traps. The first one is that Rowling is a feminist, and this is an excellent way to make feminist points. The second one is that her own foundational relationship in her family may have involved, if not a pregnancy trap, then at least a marriage that was founded on, if not coercion, then of necessity. Both parents just felt we need to get married right away because of this. That somehow infanticide was off the table. That they had enough of a relationship that they got married. But Rowling was supposed to be a boy. We know what his name was, and that's and we see that name, Simon and Peter, all throughout the books is usually a bad guy. All right, so that's the second one. The third one is the one that really takes it into an entirely different speculative realm. And I've been pointing to this for months in various posts at the weblog, and that's that Rowling herself ran a pregnancy trap herself on the UK, either with her boyfriend Michael, surname unknown, in the United Kingdom, a man she met at the University of Exeter and was with off and on for 7 years, or with her first husband in Portugal, or both. Of course, we're not going to know. We can't know any of that either. Until Rowling authorizes a critical biography and Michael comes out of the woodwork and they talk about this. We can't know this, and we certainly can't. Her first husband has been all but blackballed. He's admitted to being physically violent with her, and so what he says or doesn't say we can't know. But unless someone doorsteps the mysterious Michael from Exeter and slips him some high octane Veritaserum, we're not going to know if he was the object of a pregnancy trap. That Rowling, after 7 years in a dead end job, took a cue from her mother, and said, "Why don't I get pregnant and see if that will make him commit to me." If she did that, of course, it didn't work. We know that her breakup from Michael, really, the timing of her departure for Portugal was her breakup with Michael, not the death of her mother. It's almost 8 or 9 months after the death of her mother that she leaves for Portugal. Her all along the Watchtower comment that she was listening to that music after a breakup with a boyfriend, and that told her she had to get out of that place. She had to get to, she decided to go to Portugal. That failed pregnancy trap, whether it ended in, either ended in a miscarriage or in infanticide, that prenatal infanticide, then that would explain why we have pregnancy traps in the book. That Rowling is still dealing with that, because if she had a miscarriage, of course that's simply a tragedy, and it was something that the couple couldn't get over. If it was a deliberate abortion rather than the miscarriage abortion, then we have to assume that Rowling did that so that she could be a writer. She wouldn't be prisoner to the pram in the hallway, as one of the not so likable characters says in Troubled Blood. That would, of course, be something that would haunt her, because she becomes J.K. Rowling when she does have a child as an unmarried woman. And we do know that she, you'll have to get, I trust you to correct me on these details, Nick, but when she meets her husband in Portugal, Orontes, she enters into a relationship with him. I think he said it was the first night they were together, they were sleeping together. She becomes pregnant, has a miscarriage, and then they get married?
Yeah. So the miscarriage came before the marriage.
And we don't know if it was before the proposal or how that worked, but
No.
we don't know anything about except what the two principals have said about that. And then of course she gets married. She has her daughter Jessica, and the marriage dissolves in violence. She basically has to flee Portugal after being abused by her husband physically, according to her testimony. And clearly she made the case with sufficient proof that when he comes to the United Kingdom to see his daughter, the courts, I believe, intervene and give her some kind of restraining order. I don't know what it's called in the UK, but they're protected from his intrusions.
Yeah, we don't have the details of that. We do know that the Portuguese police assisted in the recovery of Jessica on the way out. So again, whatever she said at that point was compelling enough to get official assistance.
And that's not done lightly, right? That kind of restraining order against the father, not being able to have any kind of visitation.
Getting a temporary restraining order is relatively easy. That's purely mitigation of harm, but to make it a permanent restraining order is much more challenging.
Do we know which one she has?
We don't.
Okay. Anyway, if Rowling herself used a pregnancy trap in the United Kingdom with Michael, which either resulted in miscarriage or prenatal infanticide, or with her first husband in Portugal, which we do know ended in miscarriage the first time. We don't know. But if that, and then maybe she did it again when she came back. She made some comment about her support for abortion. She couldn't, what was it? Look into the face of the woman that she was in 19, I forget what year it was. But it was when she was back in the UK, and not say that she was for abortion, which suggested that she had one after she returned to the United Kingdom. There's some suggestion. There's big blind spots in Rowling's biography in which a pregnancy trap would fit.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, a lot of this speculation is tenuous, absence the literary clues that we're looking at. So honestly, if we didn't have that lake and shed explanation and the clear lead that Rowling has given us that lake is consequent to her life and her literature, then I would call this baseless speculation. So it's not baseless, but we must be clear that this is speculation.
Absolutely. We don't have anything other than holes. The things that we have are, the big four books that she's written in plays and have pregnancy traps at their heart. We have the current series that she's in has 14 or 15 pregnancy traps in them. There's 2 or 3 of the book, and it seems that every bad guy or woman in the books is either deploying pregnancy traps or is the fruit of a pregnancy trap. It's a giant thing inside her work. I've said this before, but it seems that if you were to take one quality of her work, pregnancy traps would be to J.K. Rowling, Robert Galbraith, what orphans and abandoned children are to Charles Dickens.
And the way I look at it is, if we knew nothing about the biography of Charles Dickens and we only read his work, would we be speculating about a deprived childhood?
Yes, obviously we would be, right? I mean, can you imagine if the equivalent were true of Shakespeare? Every one of his plays was about, an orphan or an abandoned child. We would know everything about orphanages and madness in Elizabethan England. It would have been, we would know the floor plans of every child institution in Elizabethan England. And we do know Dickens's biographical, we know the facts of his childhood and the boot blacking factory and all those things. That works. Here we have Rowling's pregnancy traps again and again and again, and their effects on the children. And Yes, this could simply be a function of her feminism, and that she finds it a trope to discuss, the power imbalances in male-female relationships. It works. We can just do that. It could also be the fact that she's the fruit of a marriage that was perhaps not unhappy, but at least was pushed forward in a way that was disadvantageous to the husband's ambitions and self-understanding and his idea of what he was going to become in his life. That Rowling's existence derailed those plans, and consequently, she had a very bad relationship with her father. I don't think that's very much of a stretch. And we get all the bad dad and the Christ-like mothers inside her books. That seems to, we know about that crisis in her life. There's facts there, but then there's the idea that this is Rowling's unresolved psychological issues. It's hard to believe that at this point she's still wrestling with those issues about her dad. I mean, she's got a very happy family. It seems, a very certainly a fruitful relationship with Dr. Murray, and her children all seem well balanced and things as far as we know. That's why is she still struggling with that? Which leads to the third possibility, and that is that she sprang pregnancy traps herself, and there were consequences to those pregnancy traps, which we don't know, but that still haunts her. The choices that she made in those situations, to spring the trap deliberately, to what she did when she became pregnant, if she became pregnant, even if it's the miscarriages only, that's enough of a crisis experience for any woman. All of us, I think, know women, even family members that have had miscarriages, and what a trauma that is. So that to me is I think that's even though it's the most speculative, I think given the pervasiveness of this and Rowling's testimony repeatedly about the lake in the shed, that her inspiration comes from unresolved psychological issues as well as her core beliefs, that there's something about her doing a pregnancy trap herself. I look forward. Obviously, either this is going to be something that future biographers will laugh about, that I said this, that this wasn't the case, when Michael comes out of the thing and said he sprung the pregnancy trap on her, that's a real possibility. It seems though that he was resistant to the relationship more than she was. All right, that's to me the exciting part of this pregnancy trap golden thread is how frankly, I've used it to open the door here to fourth generation explorations of the other plot points that run through Rowling's work. I doubt we're going to get more big shed reveals, things like literary alchemy, psychomachia, Christian symbolism, ring writing, mythology. I've done that work. Other people have done that work and like work. I don't think we're going to get many more big shed reveals of things that Rowling is going to typify all of her work that we've just totally overlooked. But the lake points, similar to the pregnancy trap threads, are a wide open field for serious readers of Rowling Galbraith. Nick, what do you think's next? After I tie up this pregnancy trap thread, what's the next thread we're gonna pull here?
Well, there's lots that we could look at. So we talked on the Charlotte Campbell podcast about suicide.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of suicides, and they're all either faked or they are at least coerced in some way.
And you're including in suicides sacrificial death, or is that a different type of?
Well, I think if we're going to make this a golden thread, and to be a golden thread, we need to look at it in more than just one work. Then I do think we have to expand it to sacrificial deaths. So if we expand the idea of fake suicides, assisted suicides, sacrificial deaths, then we can bring in the death of Dumbledore. We can bring in again, arguably, the death of Snape.
Merope Gaunt. Yeah. There's.
Yeah, I think if we are just looking
at... And in sacrificial death, you have to include Harry. Harry, he walks into the forest.
Again, you could argue many times.
Yeah, every book.
Every book. Yeah, so I think that that has a possibility of golden thread. We could look.
Just before you go on, I mean, that would make sense in terms of her core beliefs. Obviously, Rowling has not died or committed
Yeah,
suicide. We're not going to go to her
no,
biography for that, but she is consumed by mortality and morality and death being something that she said she's obsessed
yes.
with.
I mean, she's talked about she's had suicidal thoughts as well.
Ah, you're right. That's right.
So the guys that are criticizing my Charlotte is murdered, of which I have two almost overwhelming critiques. So I have Louise has criticised it on a psychological point of
This
view.
is Louise Freeman.
Louise Freeman. Now, that intellectual argument I find easier to ignore purely because I feel she was murdered on an emotional level. So I feel easier justifying. Well, okay, yeah, of course she fitted the psychological profile of a suicide because she was suicidal, but that's not to say she committed suicide. The other one is from our friend Beatrice Groves, who has critiqued it on a much more emotional level, and this I struggle with. And you've also made the point privately to me that the if Charlotte Campbell was murdered, then what does that do to the scene in Aylmerton Church?
Bingo.
and and that is one I struggle with. But and I hope to save me. Rowling is such a good writer that she can resolve the two. That Aylmerton Church maintains its meaning on emotional level, spiritual level, and we get the reveal of Charlotte's murder. And I don't know how she's going to do it, but yeah,
I think it's going to be in that church across the street from Denmark Street, the Denmark Street
the
office.
one that no one
That's
can
right.
see.
Well, you can see it from the
Yeah.
Denmark Street office, but they're always pointed at the office. They never turn the camera around, and you can see it from that angle. I've walked that place. You can't walk down that street and not
Yeah.
be aware of that church. It's the biggest.
I haven't been there other than Google Street View, and it does, doesn't it? It just dominates
And it's
that street.
such a beautiful building. I mean, it's a jewel box of a church, and I'm astonished that Robin hasn't taken her lunch in there just to sit down and eat in peace. It's such an uplifting, edifying, physical environment. I walked in there on my 2016 trip to the UK, and I couldn't believe it. I walked down Denmark Street, and off to the right, as you walk towards Strike's office from the main drag, there's this huge church right around the corner, and it's. I walked in, and there was a string quartet rehearsing, and so you had 15th, 16th century music being played. I want to imagine on original instruments inside this magnificent example of Protestant architecture, totally raising your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the heavens. No, I was again. Ever since that moment, I've just been astonished. Where is this church in here? And so when I was in the Almerton Church, I thought, well, we're going to have a counter to this. We're going to have a counter to this chapel, this bare Protestant chapel on a hill, where God comes in with his bicycle clips and talks to Cormoran. We're going to have a much more intense meeting with God in that church across the street. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that was a lovely interruption. But you're making me have a little bit more hope in my Charlotte is murdered theory if that's going to be the payoff. So yeah, I think we can relatively easily, I think, find a golden thread for suicide and sacrificial death. The rest may be a little bit more challenging. So the death of innocence, so the death of a child or the death of an innocent or abortion is possible. Again, if we broaden our scope. Now that's a challenging one. We know Rowling has views on abortion, although she's not been in a private life outspoken about it. We know what we term at the moment pro-choice. So that is, she believes that a woman should have the right to an abortion. We can infer from what she's written in Troubled Blood that she doesn't think in and of itself abortion is a good thing. So she has her most sympathetic character. So Una, I would argue, is one of the most sympathetic characters of the book. Explain how Margot changed
Right.
her view about abortion. I think that is
And
perhaps
the
a
grief of
glimpse,
Gloria Conti.
and the grief of Gloria. So although Gloria at the time considered it a necessary thing, that she's kept that with her all her life. That is not something that happened she can compartmentalize. So I think Rowling realizes that this is a very serious thing, but she still maintains, certainly when she's publicly, the few times she's publicly spoken about it, she is in favor of a woman's right to choose that. And I think if we expand that from just abortion, which I think we're going to find quite narrow, to the death of an innocent or the death of a child, or the sacrifice of an innocent, then maybe there's a possibility there. We need to find it in other works if we're going to call this a golden thread.
Yeah. Well, there's stuff that we do know about. There's this violence against women.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
And I think again we know violence against women has featured prominently in her biography. It's one of the few things we do know. Not that she's been violent against women, of course, but she, as a woman, she has had violence perpetrated upon her. I think we can be fairly confident from her public statements of saying that violence has not just been physical. So there's been a sexual aspect to it as well, horrible as that is. And we know we can find the violence of men against women in more than one of Rowling's books. So I think in terms of finding a golden thread where we can quite clearly draw a biographical like inspiration from it, we're on fairly firm ground there.
one of the things when I was tracking the big four pregnancy traps was that there always seemed to be violence beneath the trap. That the woman who and in the big four it's women, that are launching these traps, that there seems to be a hint or the suggestion that they've suffered violence beneath the trap. And at that point there's, again, I talked about this with Merope Gaunt and her father and brother. There seems to be just always this whiff of incest.
Yeah.
And that comes much more to the fore, obviously, with her adult books, the Cormoran Strike novels. Do you think incest is a thread that we can pull?
I think, again, as long as we're not too narrow. So I know exactly what you mean. So that family situation of the Gaunts, although incest is in no way explicitly stated in the text, you could say that you're right, there is a whiff of it there. And again, it's about family power dynamics. There's certainly violent attitudes. There's attitudes of control that lends that whiff to that scene. So I think if we expand what we're looking for to unhealthy family power dynamics and dynamics of control and dynamics of abuse and dynamics of violence within a family setting, then I think we have the opportunity of finding a golden thread there as well.
I was, forgive me, I was thinking about that when you talked about Holly throwing DP out of the window, and that's his loss of a child. It's like, oh my goodness, this kind of violent suggestion. I mean, we've talked privately, and I'm working independently on what happens if we pull these threads and they're actually in there. And these threads mean that the inspiration of the story is going to be Rowling somehow her response to these things, which gives an entirely different understanding of her work. I don't think the pregnancy trap thread, unless the third possibility that Rowling herself sprang these traps and regrets them or something, we're not going to get the same sort of Dickens effect where we say, aha, this is what his stories are really about. He's dealing with childhood issues.
I think it's it really depends on what Rowling wants to achieve. I think we've mentioned that with only one exception, pregnancy traps do not work. So the outcome is always a worse situation than was before. If Rowling's only intention is literary art, is because it makes a good story, then Rowling doesn't need to do anything. Doesn't need to acknowledge. Doesn't need to neither confirm nor deny, I think is the
Right.
American expression. If her point of putting this into a story is to say, look, this doesn't work. Look, this is a really horrible thing to do. It's a bad idea. You always end up worse than when you started. Then I think she might have a motivation to be more explicit about this. Now, it's understandable why she isn't. I mean, if she puts on Twitter that she likes apples, she's got 100 people angry tweeting her back, what have you got against pears? You know? So it's sort of understandable at the moment why she hasn't, but it may be something that she chooses to do in the
Yeah,
future.
I mean, there are rumors. There are rumors that she's, Team Rowling is trying to get ahead of all these questions. I mean, we know that there is one biography coming out in early next year, and Rowling clearly wants to get out ahead of this and control this narrative. She's read enough critical biographies of authors. She knows that this is where we're headed, and as I said, she's largely been the engine of this kind of speculation. My difficulty here is, I think there's another option to what you're saying, is that her motivation in writing, she doesn't have control over what comes out of the lake. She's given these ideas. What she has control over is what she makes of them. That's her shed work, her shed artistry. And the shed artistry, these aren't, if all of our speculations, baseless as they may be, are true, that would not mean that Rowling is a Mary Sue writer or something like that. She's just writing from her agonies. Because she takes these ideas into her shed and she creates these, for lack of a better word, magnificent works of structurally, their symbolism, their explorations of morality and mortality. These are profound works, and they're written in such a way that they hit home with a global audience. You only have to be human to love J.K. Rowling's books. You don't have to be someone born in West England who had difficult father-daughter relationship. I mean, this is she's really a writer who defines the age as far as we have it right now. But it's astonishing that from the conception of the Harry Potter novels on that train track, which happened after a broken meeting with her boyfriend Michael, that something had happened in there that caused all of that to come forward. To include, I think, the foundation crime of Merope Gaunt. From that moment until the pregnancy traps that are in your face in her latest work, Running Grave, and that shape in large part the series that she's running now, her longest series, her most mature work. It has to be something, I think, foundational. I don't find it's a good vehicle for a feminist writer. I think that her lake explanation means this has to be personal somehow. And I wish that she would get in front of it by asking B. Groves and Nick to come up to her place in Edinburgh and have a conversation with her about why she has pregnancy traps in her books or whatever, and get ahead of it by talking to people that know her work backwards and forwards. I'm confident she's not going to ask the the Dean of Harry Potter Scholars up there. I've said too many unkind things about her. It's funny. People think that I'm a toady, but I don't think Team Rowling thinks I'm a toady. Not a toady. Anyway, Nick, as always, I think we've done something important here. But besides speculate about Charlotte Campbell's suicide / murder, this is really what we hope to be doing now. I hope to be doing now, and I can't do without Nick's help because I don't understand a large part of Rowling's Lake. I don't think anybody who was raised outside the UK can understand the dynamics involved with Rowling's situation. It's certainly the things you shared today about Peter Rowling and his circumstances in the mid-'60s is invaluable. And I've never read anything like it in any of the works, to include all the biographies that have been put out unauthorized. So I'm happy. I've got to write up the Substack post, and we're going to put this up, and then we're going to find the next golden thread to pull, and see where it goes. And I hope that those who are listening will share other golden threads that you see that are in our blind spot, or which one of the several golden threads that Nick's listed here you want us to dig into. Because the first thing with a golden thread is just to substantiate that it exists before you get into all the speculation, guesswork. How does this fit with our biography? Things that we're not going to answer. We're not going to have answers to until Rowling talks, or her friends talk after her death, which God forbid will be in the distant future. You got to demonstrate that these threads exist before you can get into that. I want to check the box and say we've explored the pregnancy trap one.
Yeah, and I think it's also true to say, John, until you do that work, that effort, and hats off for doing it for the pregnancy trap. It's one of those things. It always seems obvious in hindsight. Now you've done the work, John, and you can see all of these points in all of her different books laid out. It looks obvious, but it's not obvious. It's not obvious at all until you do that work. So I would second John and ask anyone listening who has picked up on what they think is a theme that runs across at least two of her major works. Let us know. If it's interesting, we'll look at it.
That's a promise. That's a promise. I am excited about this. I think this is really the first book in fourth generation studies is definitely Lana Whitehead's collection, the Ivory Tower, Harry Potter and Beyond, more essays on the works of J.K. Rowling. Lana's always the first to publish these great things, because it has something about every one of her works. I mean, it's not just Harry Potter; it's Harry Potter and Beyond, and she has important essays about almost everything Rowling has written in it. The failing in that, as a fourth generational work, though, is it doesn't go across the works. It just includes every one of the works. And so that's the next step in fourth generational work is to look at these golden threads, identify them, document them, and then dive into that lake and see where the holes are in the biography and what that could mean. It's exciting work. I'm as excited about this as I was in 2002 when I published Hidden Key to Harry Potter. And in that book I talked about literary alchemy, Christian symbolism, and psychomachia. I had three of the big five things I talked about. So this is an exciting time, and I want to thank all the people that have been patient with us as we stumbled and bumbled the last 6 months with getting this stuff together. But it's life and full-time jobs, right?
Yeah. Thank you everyone that's stayed with us and made it to 2.5 hours into this podcast. John, thank you as ever for another really enlightening chat. And to everyone out there, join us again next time on Rolling Studies.